So recently I was talking with my best friend from high school, and we were talking about how good we used to have it. Now, what I mean by that is we used to have it good, guys. I mean, there's no sugarcoating it. If you're anybody that was born in the mid to late 90s, we had it good. Now, a lot of things happened in between that time period. We had 9/11, we had the 2008 recession, and a few other things that were going on. I'm not going to get too into detail about that today, but we just had it good. A lot of us had it good. And what I mean by that is, yeah, the economy wasn't too good during, the mid 2010s. It was still recovering in a way. But, prior to the 2008 recession, I mean, we had it pretty good. Things were simpler back then. We didn't have all this crazy technology. We had just a simple lifestyle. And a lot of us just don't understand, or even the newer generations don't understand what we had. And, like our parents and our grandparents, their generations had their ups and downs. And we do as well. Even to this day, my generation is not doing a favor to itself because we are suffering in a way that nobody can imagine right now. And that can go for any generation. And what I mean is, how we had it good was that it's just, it was a different time for us. Growing up in the 2000s was just different than what our parents and our grandparents did when they were growing up either in the 80s or 90s or in the 50s or 60s. So it was just a different time for them like it is a different time for us. Now, it's not a huge gap per se because you think about the 50s and 60s were only about 30 or 40 years prior. That's not a lot of time. But the thing that, got me when we were talking on the phone was that, there's just all these things that were going on. Like you had the Xbox that was, created, the updated version of it, I should say. The PlayStation was being updated. We got the iPhone. We didn't just have flip phones anymore. We were getting the iPhone. The computers were getting upgraded. A lot of these things were just, were developing and evolving over time. And we were the ones to really experience that big change. Now, not to say that it didn't happen in, say, my parents' day and age, when they grew up with different gaming consoles and all that. But I'm just talking about our generation. I'm not talking about my parents' or grandparents' generation. I'm just solely talking about our generation and what we had. And a lot of people talk about that, reminisce, the 2000s, the early 2000s, or even the late 90s. And I agree with that. I see a lot of that on social media. People post there was one I saw about the mourning dove. And if you don't know what the mourning dove is, it kind of coos in the morning, makes that faint noise that a lot of people in my generation would understand what I'm talking about. Now, the newer generation, I don't know if you guys know what a mourning dove is, but basically you would hear it in the distance and it just got you that in that mood. It was a happy, but it just has a nostalgic sound to it. And the mourning dove is not an animal that's gone extinct or anything. It's just we grew up with it because we were always outside so much. Nowadays, I've noticed that a lot of people in the younger generations don't go out as much. Now, for me personally, it was like back and forth, depending on who I stayed with because my family was divided. Mom and dad never married. And so, mom lived in an apartment and dad lived in a small house. It was, between the two things, the mourning dove was something I would pay more attention to at my dad's house than my mom's house because obviously I didn't go outside at my mom's house versus my dad's house, which we had a big yard and we could go out and do things in the yard and, have activities, play pretend and all that stuff, growing up. But that's just one example of another thing that people like us reminisce on in our generation is, the mourning dove is just like anything else, cartoons, the cartoons, we had it better, we had Courage, the Cowardly Dog, we had Ed, Edd n Eddy, we had all these other cartoons. And, the games we had, all these different games that were coming on these different consoles. You had the GameCube, you had the Xbox 360, you had the PS3, just all these different things that were going on. And, the Wii, I grew up with the Wii, and it's just one of those things, guys. I mean, we just don't realize how good we had it. You know, we didn't have to work. That's another thing that I wanted to touch upon was we didn't have to work yet. Our parents were the ones working. Our grandparents were probably still working. But, you know, we didn't have to work. We didn't have to worry about bills, life. You know, we were just existing. You know, existing is what we were doing. And, you know, I've seen a lot of, like mentioned before, I've seen a lot of that people talk about reminiscing the old days. And we are as well. I mean, a lot of our generation, you know, that were born in the 90s or just before the 2000s, you know, are reminiscing on the good old days, as we call it. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you can agree, you know, yeah, I mean, some people probably are going to say, yeah, when I was growing up in the 80s, it was the best time ever. Or if somebody was like, when I was a teenager in the 90s, it was the best time ever. Same thing goes for us, you know, the 2000s to the, you know, before COVID and all that hit. I mean, it was just a different time, you know. But you have to look back on it as a positive thing, and you can't look back on it as a negative thing, because it did happen, but you got to be a part of it versus it not happening to you at all and you not being a part of it at all. So anyway, I just wanted to, you know, talk about that a little bit, about reminiscing or how good we had it. Now, it doesn't mean that everything was perfect. I'm not saying everything was perfect for everybody. Not everybody's going to have that perfect life. I certainly had an okay life. Mine wasn't perfect either, but just reminiscing on the good times is what we had, and all those things that just, you know, make us human, you know, our emotions and all that. But at the end of the day, you know, how good we had it is how we interpret it. And all these little examples I gave may not have talked too much into them, but, you know, having it good was something that we all can look back on and talk about. And I'm pretty sure a lot of you can agree that, you know, you have probably good personal stories about what you grew up with and all that. And I'll probably talk more about that in another video. But I just wanted to clarify, you know, something that this was been on my mind for a little bit, and I wanted to talk about it. And I, of course, after consulting with my brother, basically, I mean, he is my best friend, but he's like a brother to me that I never had. And, you know, that's just one of the things that we talked about recently. So anyway, so if you guys have any suggestions for any other ideas you'd like me to talk about, just feel free to leave a comment. But thanks, guys. I hope you all have a good night, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye.